Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. Or rather, welcome to a very special deep dive where we are exploring a corner of the world that you might not think about until you absolutely have to. But when you do, it matters more than almost anything else.
It really does. It's the one event we all attend eventually, and yet the infrastructure around it, the rituals, are things we rarely question.
Exactly. So imagine the scene, and you know this scene. You are walking into a funeral home or a church. The air is distinct. It's always that mix of lilies, maybe some, old carpet, and a very heavy, stifled silence. You're wearing clothes you probably haven't put on in a year. Maybe they're a little tight. You are anxious. You are sad. You are looking for cues on what to do next.
You're in a high-stress, high-emotion environment. Your brain is basically looking for a script to follow. Anything.
Right. And what is the very first physical barrier you hit before you see the flowers, before you see the casket, before you even have to make that, difficult eye contact with the grieving family?
The podium.
It's the podium.
Yeah.
The bottleneck in the hallway.
The inevitable guest book.
Is the bouncer of the funeral world. You have to get past it. You stand in line, and there's always a line. You pick up that weighted pen, which for some reason is always like oddly heavy, like it's made of lead.
Yeah, why is that?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And you sign your name. Maybe you panic and write, "So sorry," or just your name and address like you're signing for a package.
Yeah.
Then you walk away and never think about it again.
It's purely muscle memory at this point. It's a ritual we perform on autopilot because that is what tradition dictates. We just do it.
But today, we are stopping at that podium. We are taking a stack of research, specifically using insights from a really fascinating report titled Digital Guest Books, Bridging Tradition and Modern Remembrance, and we're also looking at practical applications from sources like the Funeral Program site. And we are asking a question that might sound trivial on the surface, but is actually surprisingly deep. Is that book just a dusty list of names that gets thrown in a box, or is it a vital piece of social technology that we are currently, maybe, breaking?
That is the question. Because we are living through a massive shift. We are moving from the era of the signature, the mere proof of presence, to the era of the story. And that transition is, it's messy. It's complicated.
It feels almost wrong to talk about disrupting a funeral, doesn't it? I mean, is nothing sacred? Do we have to digitize grief? Is Silicon Valley coming for our mourning rituals now?
That's the initial reaction most people have. It's a gut reaction. Put down the phone, be present. It's a natural defensive instinct. But the source material we're analyzing today argues that if you strip away the leather binding and the cream-colored paper, the function of the guest book is actually failing in the modern world.
Failing? That's a strong word.
It is, but the argument is that it's not doing the job it was originally designed to do.
Okay, so let's start there. What is the job? I mean, if I asked a random person on the street, what is a funeral guest book for? They'd probably say, to let the family know I was there.
Right.
Or maybe so they can send me a thank you card later. Feels very administrative.
And functionally, sure, that's the administrative answer. It's a roll call, it's data collection. But the source material uses a phrase that I think changes the entire lens through which we view this object. It calls the guest book a quiet witness to a life.
A quiet witness.
Yeah.
I really like that. It elevates it immediately.
It does. It moves it from just, record keeping to emotional validation. Think about the psychology of the immediate family during a funeral. You've been there, I've been there. What is your mental state on that day?
Fog. Absolute fog. I remember when my grandfather passed, I must have shaken 200 hands. I heard, "I'm sorry for your loss," on a loop, like a broken record. But if you asked me 2 days later who was actually standing in that room, I couldn't tell you.
Not a clue.
Could name 5 people. I'm not exaggerating.
Exactly. And this is a documented psychological phenomenon. The cognitive load of grief combined with the social performance of a funeral, because it is a performance, you have to hold it together, it creates a sort of temporary amnesia. You are in survival mode. You aren't processing memories. You're just trying to keep your knees from buckling.
So the book isn't for that day. It's not a real-time feed for the family.
No, not at all. The source argues the book is entirely a tool for the after. It's an external hard drive for the love that was in that room. Because weeks later, when the adrenaline fades and the casserole stop coming and the phone stops ringing, that is when the reality sets in.
The silence after the funeral is always louder than the funeral itself.
Yeah.
That's when the loneliness hits. That's the hard part.
Precisely. And in that silence, that book becomes a retrieval mechanism. The widow sits down 3 months later, maybe on a Tuesday night when the house feels too big, and she opens that book. She sees a name, and she thinks, oh, Dave came. He drove 4 hours to be here. That signature is proof.
Proof of what, though?
Proof that her husband mattered. It's proof of impact. It's a tangible piece of evidence that says this life touched other lives.
So it's validation of the deceased's existence. It's not about the signature. It's about the I was here for you sentiment. I see you, I acknowledge this loss, and I showed up. It's the showing up that counts.
Correct. But here is where the conflict arises. And this is the core tension of our deep dive today. If the goal is validation and witnessing, is a list of signatures the best way to do that in the modern age? Or is the paper book actually an antiquated tool that's filtering out half the support?
The analog versus digital cage match.
In a way, yes. But it's not just about technology, it's about psychology. We have two very different ways of processing information now. We have the paper mode, slow, tactile, limited, and we have the digital mode, fast, expansive, infinite.
And we're stuck in the middle.
The research suggests that we are currently stuck in a very awkward middle ground where we haven't figured out how to merge them yet.
Well, let's steelman the case for the incumbent first. Let's talk about the paper book. Because despite all our iPhones and iPads in the cloud, that physical book is still at, 99% of funerals? Why has it survived this long?
The source is very clear on this. Simplicity and haptics.
Haptics, like
Yeah.
touch?
Yes, exactly. The physical feeling. There is a grounding nature to the ritual. Think about the environment again. You are emotional. You might be crying. Your hands might be shaking. You don't want to be troubleshooting a login screen.
Please enter your password to grieve.
Yeah, no thanks. I can't remember my password on a good day, let alone on the worst day of my life.
Exactly. Paper has zero latency, zero learning curve. You see a pen, you see a line, you know what to do. The source argues that in high-stress environments, cognitive ease is the most valuable asset. You need things to be frictionless.
It's fail-safe. It doesn't run out of battery. It doesn't crash. It's reliable.
It is. And then there's the intimacy of the handwriting itself. This is something the digital evangelists often overlook, but the source material really pauses on this. Handwriting is biological. It's unique to the person. If you see your grandmother's signature, that specific, shaky cursive script she had,
Oh, yeah.
that evokes her presence in a way that Times New Roman font never, ever will. That's a really strong point. I have recipe cards from my grandmother, and just seeing the way she looped her L's brings her back instantly. It feels like she touched that paper. It's a relic.
That's the trace theory, the idea that the object carries the trace of the person who touched it. Paper creates a physical link, a tangible connection to the people who were there. So we can't just dismiss the paper book as old tech. It does something emotional that screens struggle to replicate.
However, I sense a but coming, a very large but.
A massive but. While paper excels at intimacy, it fails at almost everything else regarding information density and accessibility. The source breaks this down into what they call the limitations of the medium, and the first one is the bottleneck.
The line we talked about, the hallway jam.
It's not just an annoyance, it's a content filter. You are standing there. There are 4 people behind you shifting their weight. The funeral director is looking at his watch. Do you have time to write a paragraph about the time the deceased helped you fix your flat tire in the rain in 1998?
Absolutely not. I feel the heat of the person behind me. I feel their eyes boring into my back. I write, "With deepest sympathy, Dave." And I move on. I feel pressure to be fast.
Right. The physical constraint of the line in the page forces you into cliches. You default to these generic sentiments not because you don't have a story, but because the medium doesn't give you the space or time to tell it.
So the paper book actually discourages depth. It demands brevity. It says, be quick, move along.
It demands brevity and it demands legibility, which is a whole other issue. How many of those signatures are actually readable later?
Oh, God.
If the widow can't read the name, the comfort of witnessing is lost. It just becomes a squiggle.
I've definitely seen guest books that look like doctors' prescription pads. Just incomprehensible waves of ink. You look at it later and think, who was this? Was this a person or a seismograph reading?
Laughing, exactly. But the biggest flaw, the one the source really, really hammers home, is exclusion. And this is where the modern context changes everything. 50 years ago, you lived, worked, and died in the same town. Your community was within driving distance.
Today, not so much. We move, we scatter. My family is all over the country.
We are geographically dispersed. We have the diaspora friendship. Your college friends are in London. Your work friends are in California. Your cousins are in Texas. If you have a physical book in a funeral home in Ohio, you are telling all those people.
You don't count.
It's harsh, but it's the message the medium sends. If you are not physically present in this room between 2:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. on Tuesday, you are not part of the record of this life.
It's a velvet rope. And it excludes people for reasons other than distance, too. I mean, illness, money, work schedules, childcare.
All of it. Or maybe you just physically cannot handle the funeral environment emotionally, but you still want to express love. Paper doesn't allow for that. So the paper book is intimate, but it is highly exclusionary. This brings us to section 3 of our deep dive, the digital shift. This isn't just about digitizing a list, it's about shattering that velvet rope.
The source uses the term inclusion as the primary driver here. So let's unpack that. What does that actually look like?
Inclusion is the game changer. When you move the guest book to a digital space, whether that's a dedicated memorial site, a page on a funeral home's website, or a specialized app, you are suddenly democratizing the grieving process.
So the college roommate in London can sign.
The roommate in London, the elderly aunt in the nursing home who can't travel, the old coworker you haven't seen in 10 years but who still thinks highly of you. The source mentions that digital guest books often see 3 to 4 times the number of entries compared to physical books.
Wow, 3 to 4 times. That's a significant difference. That's not a small jump.
No, it's huge. And if we go back to the idea of validation, that's a lot more validation for the family. That's a much louder chorus of people saying, this person matters.
It is, but it's not just the quantity, it's the quality, right?
Yeah.
This is where we get into that living archive concept. The source gets really poetic about this.
It does. Think about the limitations of paper again. A paper line limits you to text. A digital entry, it allows for multimedia. The source highlights this as the single biggest advantage. We aren't just talking about typing sorry for your loss.
Right.
We are talking about uploading a photo, leaving a voice note, posting a short video clip.
Which paints a much, much richer picture. Because people are complicated. They aren't one-dimensional.
Exactly. Think about the different facets of a person. You knew your grandfather as Grandpa, but you didn't know him as the prankster at the factory. You didn't know him as the guy who bought a round of drinks for everyone in 1975 because the team won.
Right. My view of him is a slice of the pie. Very specific, very important slice, but still just a slice.
A digital guest book allows all the other slice holders to dump their pieces into the middle. A work colleague can upload a photo of him receiving an award. A fishing buddy can tell a story about the one that got away. When the family reads that, they aren't just getting condolences, they are learning new things about the person they lost.
That's profound.
Mm-hmm.
It's like assembling a puzzle of the person's life, piece by piece. From all these different sources, you get to meet the versions of them you never knew. Oh, I didn't know Dad was the office comedian.
Exactly. It changes the guest book from a record of death, which is really what the paper book is, a record of who is at the funeral, to a record of life. And unlike the paper book, which, let's be honest, usually gets put in a box in the attic or the drawer of important things.
The drawer where we keep the spare keys, the super glue, and the batteries. We all have that drawer.
Right. And it stays there. The digital book is accessible indefinitely. The source highlights permanence as a feature. You can pull it up on your phone 3 years later on an anniversary. You can share it with grandkids who weren't born yet. It becomes a dynamic, accessible history rather than a static artifact.
Okay, so this sounds objectively better in terms of data, access, and richness. Infinite space, global reach, multimedia. Why is there even a debate? Why aren't we just, burning the paper books and putting iPads on the podiums?
Because we are human beings, not data processors.
Yeah.
And context matters. This brings us to section 4, the friction.
The screens and sacred spaces problem.
Yes. The clash of contexts.
Yes.
The source notes that we have a very specific, almost Pavlovian relationship with our phones.
They are dopamine machines. They are stress machines. They are work machines.
Correct. We associate these little rectangles in our pockets with work emails, with doom scrolling the news, with trivial social media drama, with Candy Crush. When you bring that device into a funeral home, a place designed for silence, reverence, and disconnection from the mundane, it creates a real cognitive dissonance.
I feel this. If I'm at a funeral and I pull out my phone, even if I'm looking up the obituary or the digital guest book, I feel like I look disrespectful. I feel like people think I'm checking the football score or texting my buddy.
That is the distraction factor.
Yeah.
There is a deeply held cultural fear that technology detracts from presence. If everyone is looking down at a screen to type a memory, are they looking at the family? Are they present in the room? Are they absorbing the reality of the loss?
It breaks the eye contact. It breaks the shared moment We are all alone together in our phones, which is the opposite of what a funeral is for.
And then there's a vulnerability aspect. Writing
Yeah.
in a physical book feels private. You write it, you close the book, or you turn the page, it feels like a whisper between you and the family.
Posting online feels like a shout.
It can feel like a performance. The source warns about the social media trap. If a digital guestbook isn't framed correctly, it can feel just like a Facebook comment section. And that introduces a whole new anxiety.
What kind of anxiety?
The anxiety of, is my memory good enough? Will people like this? Does this sound clever? Is my grammar okay?
Oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that. You introduced social anxiety into grief. I better write something profound so people know I was close to him.
Exactly. It can turn mourning into a content competition. And then we have to talk about the tech barrier. The source calls this the comfort versus accessibility balance.
We're back to the grandmother with the shaky handwriting.
We are. If you only have a digital book a QR code on the wall, you are effectively telling the 85-year-old guest, this isn't for you. You are alienating the people who might be the most traditional and the most deeply grieving. They might not have a smartphone, or they just might not be comfortable with it.
That seems like a fatal flaw. You can't alienate the elders at a funeral. That's their peer group being honored.
You absolutely cannot. So we have these two polarizing options. Paper, intimate, simple, but limited and exclusionary. Digital, expansive, rich, but potentially cold, distracting, and anxiety-inducing. What do we do? Where's the middle ground?
Well, this is the deep dive, so I assume we don't just leave it at everything is flawed. Section 5 must be about the solution.
The both-and approach?
Integration.
The source, and specifically the funeral program site, which provides a lot of resources on this, suggests that this should never be a binary choice. It is about integration. The goal is to use the physical to bridge to the digital.
Okay, paint me a picture. How does that look in practice? Do you duct tape an iPad to the guestbook stand?
A little more elegant than that, hopefully. One specific strategy is the bridge. You acknowledge that the entry point for most people is still physical, or physically in the room. So you use the printed materials, the things they hold in their hands, as the portal.
Like the program you get at the door with the order of service.
Exactly. Or the memorial card, the prayer card. The funeral program site highlights this idea of seamless integration. You put a discrete QR code or a simple URL on the back of the memorial card.
Scan here to share a story or photo, something like that.
Right. But here's the key, and this connects to the next section. You don't demand they do it now.
This changes the pressure. This is a big deal.
Changes everything. If you put a tablet on a stand right next to the casket, you are demanding immediate digital performance while people are in line.
And we already established that's a high-stress moment.
Right. But if you put a link on a program that they put in their pocket and take home, you are opening up a window for later. You're giving them permission to reflect.
This is section 6, timing and emotional processing. I think this is the sleeper insight of the whole report. It feels like the most important piece.
I agree. It's the immediacy problem versus delayed participation.
We talked about the fog earlier, the adrenaline.
During the funeral, you are operating on sympathetic nervous system arousal. It's fight or flight. You're managing your face, your tears, your handshake. You are not in a creative headspace. You are not ready to write a beautiful memoir.
I'm just trying not to ugly cry in front of my boss. I can't formulate a beautiful anecdote about the time we went fishing. I'm just trying to survive the hour.
Exactly. But 3 days later, or 2 weeks later.
When you're driving home and a song comes on the radio that reminds you of them, or you find an old photo in your drawer.
Yes. When the chemistry of your brain has shifted from survival to reflection, with a paper book, that moment is lost. The book is closed. It's in that box in the attic.
Yeah.
But with a digital guest book accessible via that program you took home, you can log in then.
And write the story, the real story, not the panicked, so sorry for your loss version.
The source suggests this delay leads to significantly deeper, more intentional storytelling. You aren't writing generic condolences because you have to. You are writing a real memory because you want to. You have the mental space to craft it.
And let's flip it to the family's perspective again. We said the support drops off a cliff after the funeral.
It does. It's the support cliff. Everyone goes back to their normal lives, and the grieving family is left in that quiet house. The flowers die. The check-ins stop. It gets very, very lonely.
But with this delayed digital model,
The family might get a notification 3 weeks later. New memory added by Sarah. New photo uploaded by Mike.
that must be incredibly powerful to get a fresh wave of love right when you're hitting a low point, when you think everyone has forgotten.
It turns the guest book from a one-day event into a season of support. It extends a timeline of care. It tells the family in a very real way, we haven't forgotten. This person is still on our minds.
That is a really beautiful perspective. It makes the technology feel less like a distraction and more like a lifeline.
It is a lifeline. But like any lifeline, it needs to be managed. Which leads us to Section 7. We've talked about the good stuff, the living archive. But we have to address the nuance of permanence. The source calls it a double-edged sword.
Right, because once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. And the internet is forever, for better or worse.
Permanence is comforting, but it can also be a burden. Imagine the digital guestbook becomes a place where people overshare. Or maybe a message is posted that is complicated. Families are complicated.
Oh, right, the estranged cousin, the ex-spouse, the drama. Every family has a little bit of it, and a funeral can bring it all to the surface.
Or simply the troll factor, not even malicious, just clumsy. Someone posting a photo that the family really didn't want shared. A photo of the deceased looking ill, or maybe a party photo that feels inappropriate for the tone they're trying to set.
Or just the fear of unexpected reminders. If the guest book is always live, does the family feel like they can ever step away from the grief, or are they constantly being pinged? Ding, remember you're sad.
That's a valid psychological risk. Grief requires oscillation. You need to grieve, and then you need to take a break from it. You need to laugh, watch a movie, forget for a minute. If your phone is constantly notifying you, you lose control of that oscillation.
So how do we solve that? How do you keep the good part of permanence without the bad?
Control. The source emphasizes moderation tools. This is where the platform itself really matters. It shouldn't be a free-for-all public forum like a social media wall. It needs to be a curated garden.
A curated garden. I like that image. It implies care and attention.
The family needs to hold the keys. They need to be able to approve posts, hide posts, or turn off notifications for a while. If you manage that control, you unlock this concept of collective memory without the risk of the Wild West of the internet.
And collective memory is the ultimate goal here, isn't it?
It is. It's the idea that no single person holds the full truth of a life. The spouse knows one version, the kids know another, the friends from work know a completely different person. When you aggregate all those in a digital space where text, audio, and photo can coexist, you get a holographic view of the human being.
You see the whole diamond, not just one facet.
Exactly. And the source argues this fosters healing because it reveals new dimensions of the loved one. You might learn that your quiet, serious father was actually the office prankster who organized the wacky tie day. That changes how you remember him. It enriches the grief, strangely enough.
It makes the loss bigger because you realize how much he was to so many people, but it also makes the gratitude bigger. You're grateful you got to know your piece of him.
Beautifully put. It expands the footprint of the life.
So we're coming to the end here. Section 8, intentionality. It seems like the takeaway isn't digital is better or paper is better.
No, not at all. If there is one sentence I want the listener to take away from all the source material we've discussed, it is this. Modernity does not determine meaning. Intention determines meaning.
Break that down. That's the bumper sticker for this whole deep dive.
A digital guestbook can be shallow, cold, and performative if it's just thrown up there as a tech gimmick. If you just slap a QR code on a wall and say nothing, you'll get emojis and generic RIP comments.
Garbage in, garbage out.
But a paper guestbook can also be shallow if it's just a list of names. The medium is not the magic. The prompt is the magic.
So how do you frame it to get the magic? How do you get the good stuff?
You have to lead the witnesses. The source suggests that the family or the funeral director needs to be specific in the invitation. Don't just say, sign the guest book. Say, please share a funny story about dad, or please upload a photo of a time you were happy together, or what's one lesson you learned from mom?
You have to give permission to be deep, to be personal.
You have to lower the barrier to vulnerability. If you ask for a story, people will give you a story. If you ask for a signature, they will give you a signature.
That applies to so much in life, honestly. Ask better questions, get better answers.
And we also have to acknowledge cultural fit. The source is very firm on this. This isn't for everyone.
Right. Some families are very private. They don't want a public grief. They don't want their loved one on a website, and that's completely okay.
And that is absolutely valid. For some, a quiet, offline goodbye is exactly what is needed. Technology should never be forced upon grief. It is a tool in the toolbox, not the whole workbench. It should be an option, not an obligation.
So let's bring this home. We've gone from the rainy parking lot to the cloud. We've looked at the psychology of the signature, the friction of the pen, and the infinite possibility of the digital archive.
It's a journey from attendance to remembrance.
From attendance to remembrance, I think that captures the shift perfectly. The paper book records who showed up. The digital book, at its best, records who the person was.
And the synthesis here is that we don't have to choose. We can have the grounding ritual of the pen and the expansive storytelling of the cloud. They address different human needs, the need for touch and the need for story.
So here is the question for you, the listener. And this is the provocative thought the expert wants to leave you with today.
I want you to project yourself forward. It's a somber thought, but bear with me for a second. Imagine your own memorial service. When all is said and done and the flowers have wilted and everyone has gone home, what do you want left behind for your family?
The legacy.
Do you want a leather-bound book with a list of names of the people who happened to be free on that Tuesday morning? A list that proves they stood in a line? Or do you want a collection of stories, photos, bad jokes, and voice notes from every single stage of your life? From the people who knew you best, accessible forever?
A list of names or a library of stories.
It's a choice between a static record and a living archive. And as we move forward, I think we're going to see that library become the most valuable heirloom a family can possess. It's the story of a life told by everyone who is in it.
Something to think about the next time you see that podium. That's it for this deep dive into digital guest books. We hope it changes the way you look at that pen.
Thanks for listening.